All right, hi everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Just a Girl from Cleveland. This is episode 118, and both of my football teams have won this week. Hallelujah. Thank God. I legitimately am a much better person when my football teams win. I'm more pleasurable to be around. I'm not as miserable. So thank God both of them won. It's not been common in my history as a sports fan, honestly, because for so much of my life, the Buckeyes were great and the Browns were awful. So it's nice when both teams can win in the same week. Very exciting. The Buckeyes beating Youngstown State, which isn't quite as impressive as the Browns win over the Cincinnati Bengals 24-3. So not even a close game, a pretty significant beating. So very, very excited about that. Obviously, we're going to get into both of those games today and everything about it. I also want to talk just some other NFL news that's happened in week one, and then get a little bit into preparing for week 2 against the Pittsburgh Steelers on Monday Night Football. So lots to get into today. Before we get into that, some housekeeping notes. I feel like every time I close this podcast out, I'm always saying the most important thing that you guys can do for me to support me and this show and the content that I make is the review or rating, share with a friend, which all of that is still very important. You should do all of those things still, and I would very much appreciate you doing all of those things. But we're adding one thing to the list now that is also very important, and that is a code. It is a 6-digit code that you can use on a purchase at where I'm from. I'm sure many of you who are Cleveland fans have probably shopped there before. Awesome sports brand. They have a variety of cities, not just Cleveland, but definitely have a ton of awesome Cleveland gear. And I have a 20% off promo code that you can use on your purchase there. So the code is Abby20, and I will be shoving it in your face on every episode and on my social media platforms. If you follow me there, you can use that code at checkout, get 20% off your order. I will also put in the description on this episode or on the YouTube description, so it's there too if you need it. But that is my new one that I'm adding to the list of ways that you can support me and my work. So if you need some gear, which you should, because we've got a long season ahead of us, and I need everyone decked out in the Muni lot every single week in the bars across Cleveland, ready to go, because it's going to be an exciting season after what we saw in week 1. So definitely check it out, get some gear. I've been shopping there for many, many, many years, and love pretty much, everything that they have and all of the cool pieces I've gotten. So, yes, check it out. So getting into the topics now after my little tangent there, we're going to start with the Buckeyes before we get into the Browns. So, like I mentioned, pretty significant win, 35-7 over Youngstown State. Looked good in general. It's what you're supposed to do against those bad teams, though. So, like I said before, it's kind of hard to find massive takeaways when you're playing teams with such less talent than you have. But I think the biggest takeaways were, one, the 2 touchdowns that Marvin Harrison Jr. had, 7 receptions for 160 yards in total. Just a really good reminder that he is the best receiver in college football, is going to be a very high first-round draft pick, incredible player, and just a good reminder of that. And then I think the other big takeaway was Kyle McCord. So he, I think, really set himself apart in this game as the number 1 quarterback on this team. 14 of 20 passes for 258 yards and 3 touchdowns. And then it actually just came out earlier today that he is officially the starter, the only quarterback they're moving forward with for the Buckeyes. Ryan Day finally made that decision. I think that's the right move. I think it was pretty clear against Youngstown State. I know it's a bad team, but he showed that he can do what he needs to do, take care of business. And I think they feel good about that moving forward. I just think it's better to make a decision rather than exist in this limbo for a long time, especially when in a couple weeks you're playing Notre Dame. I think you really want to have things more concrete and be decisive about it so that you can give it your all in games like that really matter for what your goals are throughout the rest of the season. So very, very excited about that move, and we will see. I don't have too much else to say because, like I said, it's Youngstown State. Sorry if you're a Youngstown State fan listening to this, but just not too much to add to that one. Okay, now the meat of this episode, Browns-Bengals. The joy I had watching this game, I don't think I had joy like that watching a single Browns game last year. Other than maybe Halloween against the Bengals last year, that was a pretty happy, exciting game. But like a lot of the wins last year didn't feel very good. This felt like a good, decisive win. And I'm not saying by any means this team was perfect. There were issues, some of them stemming from the weather. But overall, I was just so many of the things I was looking for to happen going into week one, they happened. It was the good things I was looking to happen with this team. So I feel really good about the performance. Like I said, weather was weird. It felt like there was just a cloud over downtown Cleveland. Like legitimately, it was just raining over the downtown area. And once you got out of there, it wasn't raining anymore, which was extremely annoying because going into the game, like weather was not supposed to be a concern. You don't feel like week one it should be a concern at all because it should be one of the nicer games of the year, considering we only get a little bit of that during football season in this city. So it was such a bummer, and it obviously affected not just Deshaun, but Joe Burrow, who was definitely the worst quarterback in the game and one of the worst in the league. Actually, he was 28th in QBR overall with 20.4 as his QBR. So pretty bad performance for him. Deshaun was actually 9th in QBR, 65.9. So even though it didn't look perfect at certain times, he was certainly better than Joe and was able to handle the conditions a little bit more, still found a way to make plays, whereas honestly, Joe just couldn't get anything going with their passing attack whatsoever. And Deshaun, I think what saved him too is the capability he has to use his feet. He had the rushing touchdown, which was huge. And he just is able to use that in other moments throughout the game that, you know, it really makes a big difference when the elements are showing up. You can't throw like you would want to. He was obviously underthrowing a lot of balls, especially in the first half, I think, while he was figuring out like, hey, this weather thing, not so good today. And quite a few balls underthrown to a variety of different guys. And it started to get a little bit better. He had one perfect pass to David Bell and David Bell dropped it. And I was like, that's how this game is going to go. He finally gets a good pass and it doesn't work out, but they found ways to get it done. And Nick Chubb still looked phenomenal as he always does. I think we forget sometimes because throughout the preseason, Nick's not playing and you're like, oh yeah, Nick's still that dude. And it's funny because this offseason, there were so many conversations with people about, should we trade Nick Chubb and get some assets back because you can just put any running back in and everything will be fine. And I think it was a good reminder that you can't do that and that Nick Chubb is still a special running back and still adds a lot of value to this team. So I definitely feel good about what we saw from him and not seeing any signs of him, you know, on a downtrend in any way. I don't feel like that has happened for him yet at all, which is really good to see. Because, you know, he's old in running back years, 27? Ancient. The other running back, Jerome Ford, had a pretty awfully timed fumble. That was a huge bummer. And I think that was a concern about him coming into this league was his ability to hold on to the ball. So that was not very promising to see. You don't want that from anyone on the field, let alone the guy that you're kind of looking at as your number two behind Nick Chubb to step in when Nick's not out there. So that was certainly a bummer as well on the offensive side. Other offensive note, we have a kicker. Yep. A kicker that made all three of their field goals in these rainy, very weird conditions. And the way that stadium erupted when he made those field goals, it was like that they've never seen a made field goal in their entire life. It was, it's kind of funny actually, that there was that much excitement around it, but I think it shows that they made the right choice, I think, in moving on from Cade and getting someone else, because I don't know if Cade was making those in the conditions in First Energy, and I think that was going to change things mentally for not just him, but the entire team. I think it's just good when you can get it done when it's your job. So definitely feel good about that move. Okay, defense. That was the biggest takeaway I had from this game was how incredible the Cleveland Browns defense looked. And if you told me 1 year ago, exactly 1 year ago, that I would be saying that about the Cleveland Browns defense, I would have told you you're crazy, because the Cleveland Browns defense was the downfall of their football team last year. One of the worst running defenses in the league. It felt like our secondary had never spoken to each other before, and we're constantly having miscommunications every single game on like, oh, is that my job? Was that your job? No one had any idea what was going on, and they lost many games. It felt like they were just firing on all cylinders all day, starting with the defensive front. Myles Garrett I still think he is the best defensive player in this league with what he is able to do. I'm sure everyone's seen the video of him pretending to dribble the ball through his legs before he goes and attacks Joe Burrow and gets past multiple defenders. That is like so savage to be able to do that and still make a play. And it just shows how special he is. He had a really great 4th down sack on Joe Burrow that gave the Browns the ball back with about 10 and a half minutes left in the game. And I think that was really crucial to be able to put it away. And it was just a wild feeling when the defense went out there on the field, to not be like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Like, we're about to blow this lead and it's all going to fall apart. Like, I had confidence in them that they were going to be able to get the Bengals offense off the field and not let them drive down and make those comebacks that we are so accustomed to in this city. That didn't happen, and I didn't have that feeling, which was really promising, I think. It felt like they all bought into what Jim Schwartz wanted them to do. And I think the bigger thing too with the defensive front, like, he was using Myles in different ways that Myles has not been used in this defense before, moving him around, which I think is going to allow him to be more effective and get to quarterbacks more often and just get pressure in general. Even if it doesn't show up in the sack numbers, like, it's going to continue to help him get pressure on quarterbacks and affect games in a way that he hasn't been able to before, because they're prioritizing that now. It felt nice to have competent defensive tackles. There weren't issues, which is a good thing. You don't want to hear those names being called constantly. And then the secondary, man, Grant Delpit had the best game of his career thus far. This is the Grant Delpit that we were hoping for when he was drafted in Cleveland in the first place. Phenomenal game. He was all over the place, like, just in a variety of different jobs. He even had a great lockdown play against T. Higgins. He was one-on-one with him and just had lockdown coverage. No concerns. And I was like, oh, that was Grant Delpit on that play? Like, he was all over the place. The rest of the secondary, Newsome, Denzel, they were both great. It was a good reminder, I think, of how good of a corner Denzel is. Martin Emerson, forgot to even mention him in that secondary. Don't want to forget him either, because he was great as well. So it was really good to see them all together kind of playing as a unit, communicating well, and all making plays. Like, there wasn't, other than I'm saying, yeah, like, Grant Delpit had one of the best games. It felt like a lot of guys were very evenly playing well, that no one really stood out. It was a big team effort from everyone across the board. So it was awesome. And the Bengals pass catchers, they couldn't do anything about it. Like, Jamar Chase obviously was talking crap leading up to the game, which is always annoying. He has like a weird vendetta against the Browns corners. Like, he really hates them. And it's maybe because they don't let him do anything ever. And I probably would hate them too for that. But this comes up often with him, where he's talking about, Cleveland in a very disrespectful way. And this time it was Cleveland is Cleveland, which was giving Browns is the Browns, from, the Steelers days. And I think this was a motivating thing for a lot of those guys. And I don't know why players want to give bulletin board material sometimes leading up to a game. Like, sometimes it's better to just not say anything at all. But he chose to say it, and Myles made comments about it. I know the entire secondary was listening, because after the win, quite a few of them were tweeting, Cleveland is Cleveland. So they definitely took it as motivation and took it personally. And, Jamar still had, some receptions throughout the game, but in general, wasn't this explosive, productive player that I'm sure he wanted to be. T. Higgins was pretty much non-existent in general. Like, none of them could really get going at all. Overall, they only allowed the Bengals to have 143 yards of total offense, and they only converted on 2 of their 15 third downs. So the Browns were stopping the Bengals on 13 of 15 third downs. That is such a big deal for this team. I can't even express it enough. Like, there's almost no words to describe it because of how bad it was last year and how good it was to see the defense be able to do that drive after drive after drive, forcing them to punt. It really was something special. I am really interested to see how this team is going to, fare as we get into some of the other AFC North matchups, and some of the other tougher games we have on our schedule, because they have played the Bengals so well in the past. Like, Joe Woods had this team prepared for the Bengals in the past, so I do want to see it against other opponents to confirm what we watched on Sunday. But I don't want to feel bad about it because of that. Like, I still think it was really good. I just know we have played this team well before and would like to get a little bit more comfortable. I don't think I mentioned this, but other than Jim Schwartz getting the game ball after the game, Dustin Hopkins, the kicker, also got a game ball after the game, and Stefanski literally gave him a hug. And I think that shows just the pressure that man was feeling to figure out the kicking situation, just so that it wasn't a burden on the team. Like, he was just like, thank you so much for what you did today, so that people aren't going to yell at me about kicking for a week. Like, that is for sure the last thing Kevin Stefanski wants to be talking about is the kicking in Cleveland. Like, he has a million other things on this team to worry about. He doesn't want to talk about it. So he's like, thank you, Dustin Hopkins, for not making me have to answer questions about this in the media. So that was really, really good to see. Okay, so couple other bits of NFL news I want to quickly discuss. First one is like more of a pop culture topic, and I had to throw this in here because you guys know how important Taylor Swift is to me. She's reportedly recently been spending some time with one Travis Kelce, and I can't describe how happy this combination makes me. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me at all. I'm not really sure if they're compatible. Maybe they are. But the fact that like Taylor is potentially dating a guy who is from Cleveland, Ohio, and we could potentially get some Cleveland references in her music, the amount of joy that would bring me, whatever songs those are, they're number one on my list. I will be listening to them constantly. I want her to mention Cleveland. I want her to mention locations in Cleveland, throw a little West Side Market in, throw, I don't know, a little Ohio City in. We could just throw whatever you want in, Taylor. I want to hear it. So we'll see if it happens, but I'm not sure what the validity is to all of these reports, but it was covering the internet today. So of course I had to bring it up because it's important to me. Two of the most important things in my life, football, Taylor Swift. So that was fun. Other news from some of the games. So something that really surprised me this weekend was the Los Angeles Rams. I feel like I potentially might have misjudged that team and what they could do. And I think that was because I was very unsure about Matthew Stafford and if he was going to be able to be the best version of himself again this year. And he looked really good week one. And I think that really changes what the ceiling of that team is. Like, they could be like a sneaky, maybe fighting for a wild card team compared to what I thought of before, where I'm like, they could be competing for the first pick in the draft. Like, I thought they were going to be not great. So I feel like I want to just watch more of that to see if, it was a week one fluke or if there's going to be a pattern of that play again. All of my takeaways, I will caveat with that. Like, week one was there was a lot of strange stuff happening. One of the other things I want to talk about was how the quarterbacks were just kind of all over the place, just in terms of who was doing well and who was doing poorly. So caveat for that, for everything I'm saying about week one, is that like there's so much football left to be played, and we will see if some of these things hold true in the coming weeks. Because it was weird to even see like how poorly Lamar Jackson was playing. I know the Ravens won, but they were, he was 30th in QBR and had a pretty tough showing. So that wasn't his best. Obviously, I already talked about Joe Burrow and his non-showing in week one as well, somewhat affected by the weather. You also have Jalen Hurts having some moments, not so great. And then Josh Allen, Monday Night Football, Josh Allen, just making some boneheaded throws at certain points in time And I know this is like kind of a part of Josh's DNA is to like kind of do some crazy things once in a while, but usually he's still making like a incredible throw and you're just like, oh wow, he really went for that. And maybe it could have gone either way and it just didn't work out. These were just like dumb plays he was making. So that was definitely, I think, concerning probably for a lot of Bills fans on just what they're going to be able to do. Some of the quarterbacks, though, that were very good, Brock Purdy, solid showing. And honestly, shout out to him just for like shutting everyone up about the Pittsburgh Steelers for a minute. Everyone was hyping up the Steelers. Everyone's talking about how good the Steelers are going to be this season. And that was all based on preseason, which we knew was ridiculous. And they absolutely crushed the Steelers. So shout out Brock Purdy. Thank you. Tua looked really good, probably some of the best Tua has looked, and interested to see if that holds up, especially can he stay healthy is always going to be the question, but week 1 Tua, very good. Jordan Love, poor Bear. If you are a Bears fan listening to this, which I don't know why you would be, I'm so sorry that you're going through this again. Because I feel like Bears fans were like, it is finally our time. We've got Justin Fields. Jordan Love is going to suck. There's no way he's going to be decent. Like, it's not possible after everything. And it looks like he might be decent. And it looks like the Bears are still bad. So sorry for that. It's definitely a bummer. And then we have, interestingly, this isn't exactly a quarterback call out, but, the Chiefs-Lions game on Thursday Night Football with the Lions winning, I think was interesting. Not because I think it made me think more highly of the Lions, because I don't feel like they played an incredible game offensively. Like, they weren't, throwing the ball all over the Chiefs. I thought the Chiefs defense actually held up pretty well. It was more the Chiefs offense that was the problem. They had no receivers. Even if Patrick Mahomes handed you the ball in your face, they still weren't going to catch it. So it was, I think, a big struggle for him. He obviously needs Travis Kelce back. I'm not putting too much weight on that game just because of that fact. But certainly something to take note of. That was really interesting. Let's see if there were any other quarterbacks that I feel like really stood out to me. Anthony Richardson. I thought he had some really good moments. He kind of reminded me of like an early Josh Allen, where you would see the really high upside of, oh my God, this guy can make those kind of plays. Like, you could see what he could be, but then he also had moments that reminded you he's a rookie and there's some growth that needs to happen in order for him to actually, be a real quarterback in this league. But it was good to see. The quarterback with the worst QBR, and this was probably the most decisive game this week, was the Cowboys beating the Giants. Daniel Jones looked horrible. And the Giants as a whole looked horrible. 40-0. That is a pummeling. Like, that is a ridiculous performance. So I don't know. They just paid him like somewhat decent money. I forget what it was. I feel like it was like 160, 170 mil, somewhere around there, but still it was really, really rough. Okay, so then the big story that just came from yesterday, Aaron Rodgers is out for the season with a Achilles injury. It was, I don't know if you guys saw the video of the actual Achilles injury, but you could see it almost looked like his leg like exploded, like it just like popped. And you could see the moment that it happened. And it was 4 plays into the game, 75 seconds. Just awful. Like, I don't care what you think of Aaron Rodgers. That's a horrible thing to happen to anyone, let alone a quarterback that a team just traded for, a quarterback that has had a Hall of Fame career and that was supposed to turn this team around. Like, it's awful. And I didn't even believe in the Jets this year that much. Like, I didn't have this hype around them like everyone else did, but I still thought they were going to be a decent team, and this is just a big blow for them. So I'm really interested to see what they're going to do moving forward. I know they're making calls today to quarterbacks on the market because I do not think that they want to move forward with Zach Wilson. I honestly kind of feel bad for Zach at certain points because it's just like everyone in the fan base doesn't like him. and he's just trying to hang on for dear life, and he knows it. So I feel for him in general. But I mean, look, that's how the sport works, and he hasn't proven that he can handle it. So it is what it is. Okay. Next up, I want to talk about Browns Steelers. It is officially Beat Pittsburgh week. One of the most important weeks of the year. I, for one, would love to go into, it's not Heinz Field anymore. I forget what they renamed it. I can't remember, but go into Pittsburgh and win this game on Monday Night Football with everyone watching. That would be going 2-0 to start the season against two division teams. That would be so sweet. It would feel so good. So far, the weather is supposed to be okay on Monday. I knock on wood, like I don't hold me to it, because I thought that this last game and it didn't happen. It's supposed to be sunny in Pittsburgh, so hopefully we can actually see what Deshaun Watson is going to look like in decent weather when he doesn't have, sheets of rain falling on him. So I am hoping the best for that. The line for the game is currently at 2.5. The Browns are favored, which is interesting. Browns favored on the road in Pittsburgh. Like, I think that shows how massive their performance was week one and how bad the Steelers played week one. That the line, I guess, does make sense if you're basing it off of what you've seen from both of these teams so far. I'm not going to get too confident, because you should never get too confident. But I think that this team should go in there and handle their business against the Steelers. They are clearly a more talented team than them, and there is no reason that shouldn't happen. There's, some other interesting factors in the game. Cam Hayward is out with a groin injury, and receiver Deontay Johnson is out with a hamstring injury. So those are two key players on that team who are not going to be playing. I think something that's going to be really interesting to watch for the Browns is the Browns offensive line against that Steelers defense. They still do have a really solid defensive line specifically. And, on the Browns offensive line, I didn't even mention this from the game, but Conklin, very unfortunate again, is out with, I think it was torn ACL and MCL. His career is probably done at this point, which is really, really sad for him. I feel for him. He fought so hard to come back from his, I think it was patella tear or something like that. I forget what the specific, something patella. And he fought so hard to come back from that, really wanted to stay in Cleveland and still be here, and just has to go out like that. It's really hard. But in his place, DeJuan Jones, our preseason hero, had to step in earlier than we probably expected him to have to really step in and get some significant time. And this week against the Steelers is going to be such a massive test for him and what he can do. He held his own in this week one game against Cincy when he had to come in. I think when an offensive line is at least doing their job, when their name isn't constantly being called on the broadcast or being brought up in conversation. So I think that is a really good sign in general. I'm sure, if and when I can dig into the tape, I'll be able to see good and bad things that he did. But in general, I would say that is a very good sign overall. And so I think that's going to be interesting to watch, is that specific matchup between those two groups. Can the offensive line protect enough to allow Deshaun Watson some time to really experiment in this offense and see what they can do? Because they didn't have the opportunity to do that as much during week one because of, the weather and all of the conditions. It was kind of just like, let's give the ball to Nick a lot. Let's let Deshaun use his legs a lot. Not as much of an exciting passing game for sure. We even saw Deshaun get to use his legs on the one touchdown play, which was incredible. I might have already brought that up, but very fun to watch a quarterback be able to run like that in a Browns jersey. I think, those are some of the key things we're going to look at. Beyond that, just in general, how our defense compares to week one. Are they still playing with the same intensity, the same level of communication? It feels like they're so excited as a group, though. The way they talk about Jim Schwartz in such a positive way, they really respect him and they all feel good about their role in his scheme, which I think is important. I feel like last year there were a lot of complaints about, like, what everyone was doing. And I think they all feel pretty good about it now. Like in the secondary last year, I know Greg was unhappy with some of his roles. It feels like that's been solved and he feels pretty good about things now. So that's what you like to see from a unit like that. Helps them play better together, get along better, all of that stuff. And we love to see it. Okay, so that is all I have for you guys. Week 2, we're making it happen. Things are going. I'm going to snap my fingers and it's going to be the end of the season. So embrace these moments, enjoy it, enjoy football on your TV 4 out of the 7 days out of the week. I couldn't even remember for a second there how many days in the week there were. That's how tired football season makes me, but that's okay. It's been a really fun week just getting to have our favorite sport back. So like I said, that's all I have. Reminder about the Where I'm From code. Just go to the Where I'm From website, put in your order, and in your checkout page, it has the promotional code box. You just put in Abby, ABBY 20, and you'll get 20% off your order. So definitely do that. And like I said, still, please leave a review, rating, share with a friend, all of that good stuff. I would very, very much appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for listening. And as always, go Browns.